Brennan.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I think we've had a very good debate. We've had 25 speakers from the backbench on the bill today. And can I congratulate everybody for their contributions? I won't go through them all because of the time available. But I will say it's been a very interesting debate. And lots of people have actually tried to categorise this bill and describe it. My right honourable friend, the Shadow Secretary of State, said at the outset that it's easier to say what this bill isn't in some ways than to say what it is, because clearly and quite confusingly it's not what it's called. It isn't really the enterprise bill. It isn't a well thought through, coherent, visionary piece of legislation setting out a clear strategic industrial strategy to use every lever at the government's disposal to promote British business and enterprise, to ease the path for British exports, which is a real problem at the moment, to take on the underlying fundamental problems of the British economy. Instead, it is, to use yet another description, Madam Deputy Speaker, a bit of a lucky dip of a bill. You stick your hand in to the bran tub and you're not quite sure what you're going to get out when you do so, except that if you're a long-serving, modestly paid worker in the public sector, or in some cases, as we heard, even in the private sector where workers have been privatised, including Magnox workers and others, you might want to remove your watch and rings before you put your hand into the bran tub, Madam Deputy Speaker, because the government is not just after top earners with its exit payments cap, it's drawing on those who have worked for many years loyally on modest pay, or in other words, as the Secretary of State would say, fat cats, because that's what he called them in his opening remarks. He said this provision in the bill will capture fat cats. What a disgraceful thing to say about those loyal public sector, in some case private sector workers who are going to be caught by this provision in this bill. And the government's going to have to think again on this and look very, very carefully on what the effects of these provisions are going to be. And we'll be scrutinising these parts of the bill extremely closely during committee stage to see if it really is the fat cats that the Secretary of State talked about that are going to be caught by that, and that every single one of those individuals will be insulted by what the Secretary of State said earlier on. And we also now hear, Madam Deputy Speaker, that the government's adding another little surprise into the bran tub. In other words, they are introducing, having abandoned previous attempts to change Sunday trading hours, they're now introducing Sunday trading hours into this bill, having studiously avoided putting this proposal in the bill when it was introduced in the other place. We now hear it intends to publish amendments to the bill tomorrow. They weren't prepared to let us have them today by putting them in the library, Madam Deputy Speaker, as we've asked for. Now, I know there are bishops in the House of Lords, Madam Deputy Speaker. I wonder whether the government was afraid to mention Sunday trading when the bill was going through its Lord's stages, whether that had anything to do with it. How very convenient, Madam Deputy Speaker, for the government that the result of its consultation on Sunday trading should be published the day after the second reading of the bill in this House, and not while that bill was going through the House of Lords. How very unfortunate for the House of Commons that the government, with all the resources at its disposal, couldn't manage to publish the consultation before today's second reading, having had it for 5 months, or even timetable this debate after the consultation was ready to be published. And how interesting, Madam Deputy Speaker, that the government is rushing into committee next week without leaving the customary 2 weekends between second reading and committee stage of the bill to allow this House enough time to prepare and table amendments to the bill. This was done without the usual indications that would take place when discussions were held about this matter, and I'm not going to go into what's said in usual challenge, but a whole new controversial proposal has been introduced into this bill. And, Mr. Speaker, how typical is that? Madam Deputy Speaker, I apologise. How typical is that of the government's modus operandi, of governing from the shadows? They treat this House and proper democratic accountability with utter contempt. Madam Deputy Speaker, the government has no mandate in its manifesto to change the laws on Sunday trading. It's got no compelling case to do so that's of significant economic benefit. It's got no justification for this late addition to a bill already more than halfway through its process of parliamentary scrutiny. It's been through first reading, second reading, committee stage, report stage, third reading and second reading here in the House of Commons without us seeing what its proposals are. It's not in their manifesto, it's not in the bill we're voting on tonight, it's not even in the library of the House of Commons, Madam Deputy Speaker, so there has to be extra time on report to consider these issues later on in the proceedings, and the Government will have to give way on that point. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, it's a lucky dip bill. You can pull out some nicely wrapped goodies from the bill, but as so often with a lucky dip, unwrapping and closer inspection may well leave you somewhat underwhelmed by your prize. We welcome the proposals for a small business commissioner, but the Government's proposal is a pale imitation of what's needed. There are over 5 million small businesses in this country, but the Government anticipates that the small business commissioner will deal with just 500 cases per year. Now, we know from the experience of Australia, particularly from the Small Business Commissioner in the state of Victoria in Australia, the splendidly named Mark Brennan, that for a small, no relation as far as I know, that for a small, I don't have to declare my interest on that one, Madam Deputy Speaker, that for a small business commissioner to work, it has to have the right roles and responsibilities. And our Labour colleagues in the other place have strengthened the Small Business Commissioner proposal, but the Government's model doesn't live up to the best practice shown in Australia or to the Small Business Administration in the USA. And we welcome also some of the other bits in the brand tub of the bill, the extension of the primary authority scheme, the local authority one-stop shop for business regulation, which the last Labour government introduced. We welcome the emphasis on apprenticeships and acknowledge the Government wants to build on the achievements of the last Labour government, rescuing apprenticeships from near oblivion and expanding their numbers considerably. But we need to know more about quality and how the Government will pay for its plans, as my right honourable friend rightly indicated, including how this impacts on the proposed apprenticeship levy and, of course, on public services. We welcome the amendment, Madam Deputy Speaker, to the Industrial Development Act and the extension to digital, but this needs to be set in the context of a proper industrial strategy for this country, not an anti-European, laissez-faire, free-for-all, which will lead to a race to the bottom for jobs, wages and productivity. And there are also clauses relating to late payments and non-domestic rates which are welcome, but I do want to mention two other issues which are new items in our lucky dip, which were introduced in the other place. First, on the pub code, and this has been mentioned during the course of our debate today. Now, I recall as a minister at the Department for Business, Innovations and Skills clearing all the necessaries on proceeding with fair proposals for pub tenants back in 2009-10, and even going so far as squaring them off with the Tory opposition front benchers at the time to ensure that they would proceed after the change in government. And since then, the first coalition and now this government has had to be dragged reluctantly to do the right thing. As my right honourable friend has said, a market rent option at rent renewal was the minimum required from the government to fulfil its commitments it's made to tenants. So I welcome the fact that the Secretary of State has accepted Labour's amendments in the Lords, and it's about time really that the government stood up for local pubs and didn't just suck up to the pub codes. The other place also introduced amendments in relation to the Green Investment Bank. Now, the proposed privatisation of the bank by the government, whilst deleting its statutory green purpose, is even more pressing with the Chancellor's announcement about Lloyds Bank. Does the government accept that there's a mess being put together in relation to the privatisation proposals? It said it will remove the changes that were made in the Lords in relation to the Green Investment Bank. Does it have a mechanism that will both satisfy the Office of National Statistics, as my right honourable friend asked, but will also guarantee the bank's green mission? Because if it doesn't satisfy the Office of National Statistics, how can it possibly proceed with the privatisation of the Green Investment Bank on those terms? And by the way, if it's the wrong time to sell Lloyds, why is it the right time to sell the Green Investment Bank? Does she agree with her colleague, the honourable member for Waveney, about the privatisation of the Green Investment Bank? Because he said to the Minister at the Environmental Audit Committee on November the 26th, he said then, why now? The bank has just made £100,000 profit. Some people might accuse you of selling your turkey in August bank holiday and not on Christmas Eve. And the Minister answered at the time, I think it is the right time to do it. The market is in a good place and clearly people are interested, so let's get on with it and do it. Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, Christmas Eve has come and gone, and the Chancellor tells us the market is in far from a good place. So what's the rush to truss up the Green Investment Bank and sell it at this point? Wouldn't it be prudent, if they want to sell it off, to fatten it up first and sell it later rather than now, if indeed it is possible to privatise it without it losing its green purpose? And I put that to the Minister. In conclusion, Madam Deputy Speaker, my right honourable friend commented on the smallness of this bill's vision compared with the hyperbole of the government's rhetoric. It lacks the ambition to set out a real strategy to meet the real challenges facing British business and industry. Some of its contents are helpful, some are likely to have unintended consequences and cause harm to the lower paid, to pensioners and to industrial relations. We'll scrutinise it very carefully in committee and, if necessary, oppose those parts which are likely to cause harm. We're not going to vote against at second reading this evening, Madam Deputy Speaker, but there are issues in this bill which undoubtedly we will have to divide on at a later stage. If this is a lucky dip bill, Madam Deputy Speaker, it's one where the main prize, a proper strategy for UK enterprise and business, has been left out of the raffle.